COT's base of operations is right here at thecounciloftime.com. COT has no other outlet or venue. These are other folks who will rebroadcast, like DailyExcellence, who is authorized to rebroadcast by way of video. Well, today I thought it would be time to have a discussion, to begin to have a discussion. I have to let you know, you guys may not believe me. You may not. But it's not my task to make anybody believe me. Remember something. Anything anybody states that is of truth is going to confirm itself deep down inside in your spirit. Okay? Nobody can mimic that. Nobody can. That would be the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth operating in you. It is what confirms a truth. It's not that you guess something would be true. Everything in you will know it's true. You don't know how. You may not be able to articulate it. You may not be able to go through any procedure or any type of process to validate it. You'll just know it's true. All right? So we're going to discuss some things today that you'll find that out. Now, we all know for a long time, there have been many stories told about many different things. Right? One of the topics that is most discussed during this time that we live in right now is, those stories of what the world does, disclosure, their disclosure. I'm going to start our disclosure. How about that? And it's time. So I wouldn't call it disclosure, more like discovery. That's what I would call it, discovery. I'll tell you something. In this world, in our lives as believers, it's important that we know what we're up against, what's been happening. It's very important. I'm going to begin by discussing something, a word, a phrase you guys are familiar with. And it's a modern day phrase. But what if I were to tell you that in fact, that phrase is 4,000 to 6,000 years old? Would you be shocked? A common phrase, a phrase that people have gone and talked about, something that men aspire to accomplish. It's an old term. Before I tell you what the term is, let me tell you why I'm going to mention that in the first place. There are some parchments, writings, documented history of something that happened a very long time ago. It's been found in Africa. It's been found in the Middle East. It's been found in Qumran. It's been found in Mexico. It's been found in South America. The same writings found all over the world. It's not something that a person would usually discuss. So I can tell you right now, it's a dangerous topic. Not to you, the listener, but to those who handle that knowledge. Dangerous because nobody wants the information out. And they do everything to kind of smother the information, make it seem like it's needless, useless. Nevertheless, I'll give you some insights that will serve you well. Be well. It'll put things into perspective. It brings up some hard questions. It's very difficult questions. Nevertheless, I can't deny that I've seen it in too many places. I began to see this way back in 88. 88 was the first time. And from that point on, We've seen it in various places in the Middle East, right outside of Jordan and Israel. Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Afghanistan, 2 places in Russia, or close to Russia. Africa, as I said before. Brazil. Seen it in a few places. And it deals with something ancient that you are familiar with. On occasion, we have read the book of Enoch, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the book of Enoch. There's some other writings that are exactly alike, very similar. The whole set of whatever writings they come from, to my knowledge, has not been found. But the stories keep popping up. And it has to do with the fallen angels. The truth about the fallen angel. Not the controlled story. The only thing we won't get in today, and I don't know, we may, depends on where the Spirit leads me, is why it is so important, or it was so important back then, to remove that book, to remove those documents, those readings from history. They wanted that erased from history. Today, there's an active campaign to keep that out of your mind. It is. So I'm going to break that little thing now, right now. It is so that you never find out what you're living in the middle of. Because if you can't see it, you're not going to be bothered by it. If you can't see it, you're not going to stop it. If you can't see it, you'll slowly conform to it. One of the reasons that was documented, they removed these writings so they could have centralized control over worship. In other words, and it's kind of bad to say this, but the priests of that time wanted people to come to them. They did not want people to go directly to the spiritual authority, our Father. They didn't. They wanted to control how people believe. They wanted to control your faith because of an old term that exists today. And it is an eye-opener. Because if you ever see this in ancient writings, it will make you look twice, 3 times, 4 times, and 5 times. You ready? So here's the term. New World Order. That is not a new phrase. Don't you find that ironic? That phrase, that term, the New World Order, that is not a new phrase. It's not. Here's what makes it so dangerous. Since it was found 4 to 6 to 7,000 years ago in those writings, it existed back then. What in the world were they talking about? You'd be shocked to learn the same thing they're talking about now. As we unfold this, I have to give you a caution. Please don't jump to preconceived notions. Have no conclusions. Have none. Okay, have none. This type of information requires confirmation from the Holy Ghost. Not by assumption. Never by assumption. This is a topic dealing with some very real things. Very active things. Yes, it will put some things in perspective. But if I were you, I would not try to make anybody else understand it. It is something that the Lord will either confirm within a person or not. It is not something that you should challenge anybody with. In a lot of cases, knowledge. When you gain knowledge, then keep the knowledge. Never try to convince anybody else of that knowledge. Always wait upon your Father in heaven before you make a move to enlighten anybody else, so to speak. Right? You don't want to do that on your own. You need to know if it's a truth confirmed to you by the Father. Don't ever take any truth that I give you and say, well, that's confirmed. Don't do it. to any human being nor any spirit unless your Father in heaven confirms it within you. Hope you guys have that. So that means even if an angel comes up to you and that angel tells you something, do not confirm that as truth by assumption. You need the Holy Spirit to confirm that within you. It does not matter where it comes from. We live in a world of imposters. Today we're going to uncover the nature of how those imposters work and just why so many people have found themselves powerless in some of the most common situations. I mean common. But ironically, it won't provoke fear. By the time we're done, you'll understand. You'll understand. We're going to start with the fallen angels here real quick. So everybody knows the story of the fallen angels to a degree. Some know it by the New King, the King James Version of the Bible in the Old Testament, Genesis chapter 6. Some know it by Enoch. Some know it by Jasher. Some know it by other books. Some know it by some of the parchments that were found and some of the documents discussing the giants. Some know it that way. The fallen angels, they wanted something. They did. But angels, period, have been around long before time began. Think about that. All these documents, including some of the original script of the Bible, always say the same thing about angels. They were around before time began. Angels are, the word translated would be, their nature would be celestial. So in other words, they are spirit. Right? They're not in a form that we would understand. They're in a higher form. Much higher form. Fallen angels, they too existed before time began. When I say time began, that means before anybody recorded anything, these things were, and they were already educated. So think about that. They could have been alive. These angels could have existed trillions upon trillions of years before the earth existed. Think about that. Before the solar system existed, before the galaxies existed. Just think about that. And fully educated. Think about that. Fully educated. Fully. So they were of a different nature altogether. Now, many books have wrote assumptions about angels. I'm going to tell you this. Unless the Lord gives you something direct, there have been many, many, many falsehoods written about angels, things that people have made up, things that people have taken from astrologers and psychics and all these other folks who write about esoteric things. So you had to be careful about what you believe about angels. You had to be careful. You got to be very careful. The truth is, we may know a few names. You may even have felt the nature of an angel. The truth is, we don't know a lot. Everybody does not know a lot. And unless you have been introduced, unless you have somehow been immersed in the presence of angelic beings, all you know is what somebody else has come up with. Keep that in mind. I'm saying that so that nobody has any preconceived notions and they start describing what angels are. If anybody right now were to describe what an angel is, the truth is they're taking it from somebody else. But if somebody were to ask you directly, what do you know about angels? If you were to die if you lied, what would your answer be? I don't think too many of us would have a comment. Not too many of us would have a comment. If we were asked the question, what do you know about angels? And if we lied, we were going to die a miserable death. Not too many of us would have an answer, truth be told. So what we know about angels, we know through writings. We know through other people's conversations. We know through information passed down. Right? Keep that in mind. That's why knowledge of angels. If you gain knowledge of angels, you keep that knowledge. Don't teach anybody else until your Father has confirmed a truth within you. Until he has shown you that. And if you want to know what an angel is, then say, Lord, I need the truth here. Can you show me what an angel is? That's all. That's all you have to do. And from that moment on, if you really mean that, from that moment on, notate your dreams. Be observant, and you'll see. Okay, so they've been around for a long time. They are direct creations of God. And they too have their process. They have a process. They have a process of education, of empowerment, of the things they do. How all that works? Well, now, we probably don't need to know that. But the story of the fallen angels is that 200 fell on Mount Hermon. The lead fallen angel made a pact with the rest of the fallen angels. He had a desire that was recorded by nations at that time. He had a desire that was recorded by the nations of that time. Now, these angels are bound up. You know that. These angels are powerless. Powerless. They are bound up. They can't do a thing. They cannot do anything. They can't do a thing. But it's only 200. We know the Bible tells us how many angels fell with Lucifer. How many fell with Lucifer? Anybody? How many angels rebelled with Lucifer? Anybody know? How many? Somebody give me that. There we go. 1/3 of the angels fell with Lucifer. Now, these were watchers. They were assigned to watch over the earth to intercede for mankind. Semyaza was their leader, and he decided to do something on the earth. They were watching over earth, watching over mankind. He decided within himself, similar to Lucifer, and in fact, it's just like Lucifer, you could say. He decided that he could subdue the earth better than the Creator. And that he and the other fallen angels, that they would have children on the earth far better than humans. Okay? Far better than humans. So they made a pact on Mount Hermon. They took an oath, and they were bound by mutual, some sort of mutual contract, I'll say, that they would take unto themselves wives. Now, a lot of these writings, they say that when they took unto themselves wives, it was very unnatural, sometimes brutal, in a twisted type of interaction. Twisted. These women, of course, something began to grow in them. Something that had parts of the heavens in them, and part human. It is said, it was written in all these old documents that from humans, the flesh came over these beings. So the bodies of these beings came from human beings. Everything else came from the fallen angels. Everything else. It's also said, and because, we're going to pause real quick. Now, different cultures in the USA, different cultures, Indians in the USA, Indians in Mexico, a lot of cultures all over the world have the same story. The Sumerians, they have the same thing too. those from the skies. In America, a lot of the Indians call them the serpent gods, came down, made it with women, and they had children. And some of the children, right? Some of the children destroyed the woman before they were even ready to come out because they grew so fast. Some of the women had the children, but never really recovered, and some did. And not all of them were ginormous. At the age, they said when these children were about a couple of months old, or a month old, or something like that, they were the size of a grown man. And they just grew from there. Now, the Indians have this story. The Native Americans have these stories. They have them. Now, when they were little like that, as they were growing, these things from the sky, the fallen angels, would come and take them and educate them. Not all of them, but they would educate them. They came back. Certainly the first 200 did. And then they came back to rule over mankind. So they started kingdom building in the earth. Then they had children. Here in America, with the Native Americans, with a lot of different tribes, they say the same thing. That some of these giants, right? Some of these giants, they then had more Nephilim through themselves or with other human beings. And the population of Nephilim grew in the earth. The first ones were huge. Second generation, some of those were even bigger. But the point is, many of them were on the earth, but not all of them led. But they had kingdoms. And they kept doing that. 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 Some of them said, were there any female Nephilim? Yes. Not first generation, though, I don't believe. Not first generation. These are like second, third, fourth, according to the writing, second, third, fourth. So they filled the earth. In the Bible, it says there were Nephilim before the flood and also after that. So we're going to clarify that, the also after that part. Now, imagine a world where these fallen angels taught their sons and their daughters the not heavenly knowledge they were not supposed to teach. They weren't supposed to teach this knowledge. In the book of Enoch, which some of you have read, for example, Azazel, he instructed them in the arts of war, right? Strategy, tactics, purpose, precision of tactics. But what's in these other documents? Not only did he teach them, but he taught them how to enchant the weapon. Certain symbols that go on the weapons that increase the power of that weapon. Right? And with him and Kokabeel and Tamiel, Asbiel, all these different fallen angels, they essentially taught the Nephilim some powerful things that mankind was not supposed to know. Azazel, by the way, taught mankind too, but then he taught the Nephilim more dangerous, things. More dangerous things. So let me give you an example of some of the extended things they taught. Semyaza. In the book of Enoch, it said that Semyaza taught them how to bind spirits, right? Enchantments and the resolving of enchantments, so on and so forth. In this case, Semyaza was extended. It said he taught them how to command the forces. How to command the forces. How to manipulate the invisible threads that tie all living things together. Right? What was the result of that? It was said that they could summon storms with one word. With a whisper, they could summon storms. That's right, sorcerers. They could summon storms with a whisper. Some people could do the same thing. Do you understand that? So if you know the words, people could do the same thing. But they could summon storms. They could make the earth tremble with a gesture. They could kill anything from miles away without touching it. This is what they were. Now, they learned sorcery. They learned tactics and war. They learned about astrology. And when it says that, Tamiel and I believe Kokabeel, they taught astrology and the path of the stars, so on and so forth. But they also taught some of the ancient angelic gateways that connected Earth to other places. That's what they taught them, how to travel from the Earth to other places. Other places. The path of the stars, but also how to travel to each realm of the stars. So there's a lot going on, right? That mankind has gotten a hold of. I'll tell you right now, though, I know for a fact there are teams that work on this stuff, and they take stuff, and they hide stuff, and you'll never see that stuff, and you'll never see those people, and they'll never disclose any of this stuff to anybody unless you are somehow indirectly or directly involved with these teams. Doesn't matter how much disclosure they say they're going to have, they're not going to disclose this. But all of what I'm talking about today does not come from their material. This comes from some of the ancient writings, the parchments, which happens to be the same stuff they own. But as I'm talking, I want you guys to listen. I want you to listen. You know what's happening in the world today. I need you to hear it so you understand what you're up against. For example, there's a celestial calendar. With this calendar, it has the fates. This calendar has the fates, actual fates of things that happen on the earth like clockwork. Now you have these, I'm going to call them meatball astrologers, right? Who try to make money off things. If somebody knew about true astrology, they would not try to make money off of it. That'd be the last thing they do. In fact, when they know about real things, they will never attempt to make money off of it. Do you know why? Anybody know why? Because they're not going to think the same as everybody else. That's why. They're not going to try and make money off it. When somebody tries to make money off something, they really don't know about that specific thing. They don't know the implications of it. They don't know the power of it. They don't know that. If they knew the power of it, the last thing they would do is attempt to sell it. They certainly would not irresponsibly give out that knowledge. They wouldn't do it at all. That goes to say that if there are people who know about this, and I'm sure there are, you didn't read about it. You didn't. They're going to hold that close in families. They will. They understand the implications. Not the implications on you, but the implications on the person who would dare speak a word. The Nephilim can take it. They were half human and half angel. They could take what came from speaking these words, but a human being cannot. They'd be hard-pressed to take speaking them. For a human being to speak one of these incantations, one of these phrases, it would be like you giving up your life force right there that very moment in a very painful way. How about that? So yeah, they could speak it. Something would take place. They would be in pain for the rest of their lives. Would you ever use one of those words if you knew it? Because when what they taught them, right? God uses authority. This is not what they taught their children. They didn't teach their children authority. They taught their children a type of manipulation, a type of deal, a give and take language. So sure, you can speak a word and have something happen, but it will certainly take from you. But if you're half angelic, angels don't die. And if it takes a piece of your life force, then so be it. But a human being, you're done. You're finished. You're done. Finished. Which is why there's some real world things that happen where people attempt to get another person possessed. And if that possessed person doesn't, it's of no consequence in their mortal bodies. So there are a lot of people in the earth that try to get a person possessed for that purpose. A controlled evoking of these incantations. Let me continue though. So they taught their children all these different things. And their children, right? Being in this world, being kings over places, I believe that the Sumerian tales outline stories of the Nephilim, and they left out the Zechariah Ascension did not translate the horrible things. He didn't. He has everybody believing that somehow the Sumerians were just like you and I. They were not. They were not. Whenever you come across the Pantheon and all these different things, start looking at the characters and how their names diverge, but how similar they are, because they're talking about the same people. I'm not going to call them people, the same things that were on the earth at the time. But these things had a problem. They were spirit and they were flesh. Their flesh hungered. Their flesh hungered, and it would never end. They were starving their entire lives. Though they would eat and eat and eat, they were starving. There are stories written where they would go stand over the ocean and scoop up a bunch of fish and whales and everything else, and they were still starving. In the book of Enoch, it says they ate up all the acquisitions of men. These other writings, they corroborate that, but they were still starving. Then they began to eat people. And then it documents how that happened, how people would wake up in their villages and they would see a large shadow over their village, and people would start running just by seeing one of them, but there was nowhere to run. And children and men and women, they would begin to pick them like berries and eat them until the earth filled up with blood, human blood, animal blood. Then when they ran out of human beings because they ate up everything else, they began to eat each other. They began to turn against each other and eat each other. In the book of Enoch, it says that they began to fight one another. They had these big wars. They left craters in the earth. Mountains were knocked over or knocked down. Now, before you say, well, that's just ridiculous. Yeah, I wouldn't jump to conclusions. Now, I do know that some of these, some folks, a group of folks, will introduce the world to some very ancient things. And at first, you're not going to believe until you begin to see it everywhere. And you'll have no choice but to surrender your resistance in believing in the ancient world. And at that time, everything's going to go upside down. And then in that day, you'll say the past should have been left in the past. Right now, everybody wants to know the past because you're not connected to the horror of the past. It's kind of like a person. Think of a person right now who says, I'd like to be 18 again. It sounds good, right? To pick out the best day of your life, the best moments of your life. But see, you forgot about the horror of being 18. You forgot about the misery that you had when you were 18. You forgot about, nobody ever talks about the horrific times. They talk about going down memory lane. That's what they're thinking about. And they say, well, I'd like to do that again. I'd like to go back and just, hang out with this friend again. But then if you begin to think soberly about that time back in the past where it was just your glory days, there was misery and a little horror, stress, and some more things you totally forgot about. When you think of the whole picture, back when you were 18, you'll say, no thanks. Right? Isn't that what you'll end up saying? Once you think about everything that happened when you were 18. You say, no, I can't go back through that again. I can't do it again. A lot of people right now, they're curious about the past because they make it seem so painless. People see movies. Everybody is interested in discovery. I knew an archaeologist, a few of them, but one of them in particular. He was so fascinated with Indiana Jones. He went to college. He did the whole thing. But when he began to actually go to sites and dig things up, he said, I can't do this. This stuff I'm in ridiculous conditions. Everybody's jumping up and down excited, and I'm suffering. This guy said he was suffering the entire time. So he's not doing that anymore. He found out quickly that his passion was based on what he saw from television, the glory he read from books, people finding things, but nobody ever talks about the backbreaking work. How many times you have to stay out in the middle of nowhere with mosquitoes everywhere, biting you to pieces, and this, and it. Yeah, so when you start thinking about the whole thing, your mind changes. That's called being sober. We often think about the glory of a thing, right? We don't think about the whole subject. In the past, it was horrifying. That's why God destroyed it with water. It had to be horrifying if the Father destroyed everything with water. Now, some people say, well, the Bible says there were Nephilim before the flood and also after that. And that's why Goliath was there. Right? That's what they say. Goliath was not he wasn't a Nephilim. Goliath was an Anakim. And so he was far removed from that nobody from the first generation made it. Nobody did. Nobody. But some of the mutated human genes made it. Right back over here to the USA and other places. We had the same thing, but there's a flood story here where nobody made it. Nobody made it. Over here with Native Americans, it says that the water went right up into the atmosphere. Who can survive that? You're not going to swim that long. There's mixed evidence they show you guys called dinosaur bones. Remember I asked you guys one time, I said, why is it so important for the world to introduce every child to dinosaurs? Why is it important that every child be introduced to dinosaurs? Let me give you my opinion. Let me be clear about this. I'm going to give you my opinion. In my opinion, it's important that they sell you that story. It's very important they sell you that story. Because what if those dinosaurs didn't look like what they're selling? Like some of the first dinosaur bones or complete specimens that were found, they were fake. Real bones, but they put them together to create something that never existed. But I'll tell you something, they spend a lot of money. They spend a lot of money on dinosaurs. Do you know that? Trillions of dollars they spend on dinosaurs. You don't believe me? Start researching. You're going to find they spend trillions of dollars on dinosaurs. Not billions, trillions of dollars on dinosaurs. And you ask yourself, why does the world spend trillions of dollars on dinosaurs? Why? You're not going to tell me because they're just, fascinating. No. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. You guys remember the Lucy specimen? Remember the Lucy specimen, the specimens that they had found that were human beings, like in between their transition from going from monkey to modern day humans. Many of those were false, made up lies. They were lies. that you cannot get paid by the government if you don't support the lies. You're not going to get a grant. You're going to be stripped of all your records and everything else. You go against that, you're done for, and you cannot fight it. So nobody should actually try that because you can't fight it. You can't fight that. Back to these fallen angels and their children. Children were horrific. Now, these children had an insatiable appetite. They had lots of questions. They were doomed from the beginning. Let me share something else with you. God knew that the fallen angels would fall. God knew that the fallen angels would have children. You know, their children cannot be saved. Now, the children of the Nephilim, they did not bring themselves into existence, did they? They didn't. So let me ask you this. If they didn't bring themselves into existence, why do they all have to perish? And let me tell you how they perished, what their sentence was. Because not only were they cursed in the flesh, but they were also cursed after death too. When the bodies of these Nephilim died, their spirits, the soul of that Nephilim, was to remain on earth and to be known as demons. Demons. Now, their attitude, before I get into the demon part, they had insatiable appetites. They were driven to exercise their power and their dominance over people. They were primarily concerned with power, with dominance, with ruling, with utilizing everything they could utilize to subdue everything, to place everything under their feet. While they were living, one of their fathers, Asbiel, taught them how to lie, how to manipulate. He showed them how to use words as weapons, how to turn allies against one another. What does that sound like? Politics. Politics. He taught them the art of debate, to start confusion among angels and men. He taught them this, to overcome their enemies. You see what they were being taught? They were taught all this stuff, right? Yad Toriel taught mystical defenses, the inscription of symbols of power and on armor and walls, both as weapons and defenses. Think about that, an inscription, a symbol on every weapon and a symbol on their clothes and a symbol on their armor and a symbol on their castles and a symbol on every building. These are mystical defenses. What do we have today? Every aircraft has the same thing. Every building has the same thing. Every company has the same thing. Every car has the same thing. Every aircraft has the same thing. Anything that flies in the sky shares the same inscription. You just haven't looked at that yet. It's the exact same inscription, or it does not fly. What kind of world are you living in? There were Nephilim before the flood and also after that. That's Genesis 6, right? Genesis 6. What do we find out in the book of Daniel? And in the last kingdom, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but shall not cleave one to another. They're doing it again. It's been 2,000 years, and within this 2,000 years, everything these parchments talk about back then, they have a modern day equivalent right now. Now, when I come back from this break, I need to talk to you about the nature of these Nephilim. I know a lot of people, they look at the giant part. I want you guys to forget about the giant part. The giant part's not important at all. It's not important. It's not. I want you to see what's before you. So at least you won't walk with a blindness. And if you don't believe it somehow, then test every spirit by the Spirit. And I'll even go over that. And if you don't consider something even after that, then go further yourself and see for yourself. See what actually is repelled from the name of Jesus. Not by you saying it either. You don't have to say it. You do not have to say that name to repel things. You know why? Because that name is established in the eternal realms, and everything in the eternal realms, they know that name, and they know where that name is, and they know of whom Jesus does reside in. They know who's affiliated with the Messiah. You don't have to tell them. They already know. So if Christ be within you, then you walk around with power and a repulsion within yourselves. Only by compromise can you relinquish that shield. Be back in a moment right here at the Council of Time. Back to our conversation. The same desire. Oh, by the way, forget their giants. Forget their giants. Okay. Forget their giants. Don't think about that. I think that is distracting for the sake of this conversation. It does not matter what they were. Doesn't matter. I know that people have researched. I know that you guys have, a lot of people who have researched. For the sake of this conversation, though, it does not matter that they were giants. Now, they were neither human nor angel, a mixture between the two. They had an insatiable appetite. They were doomed from the beginning, and they knew it. It's written that one time it was overheard in council of them. One of the Nephilim had asked one of their angelic parents, "What are we? What are we?" And nobody would ever answer. They wouldn't tell them. They couldn't tell them. Right? They couldn't tell them. Now hear me on this, because this is where you had to be sober. This is where you had to be sober. And now I'm not picking on anybody who's Catholic either. Okay, I want you guys to remember that. I'm not picking on anybody who's Catholic, because you were not Catholic. You were not part of Rome. You weren't back in the Roman days. Hopefully you were not. They were in Rome and some other places. They did not want any of these writings anywhere. And so remember that. They didn't want them anywhere. Right? The Catholic Church, they probably will, because of the feuding that's happening in the Catholic Church. You're going to learn about what I'm talking about right now on their side. They know this too, but they don't want people to have it. But there's a feud happening. And so out of their vaults, these things may come. But I need to talk to you guys about these Nephilim, because in the Bible it says they were mighty men, men of renown. Do you know what renown means? Well-known men. Some of them were not giants. Some of them people talked favorably toward. So let me say that one more time. Some of them people talked favorably towards. Now, why would a person talk favorably towards any of the Nephilim. Why? Why would a human being talk favorably towards the Nephilim? You can find it all throughout history. In the kingdom, they would always parade their leader, lift up their leader, do all sorts of things to their leaders, especially those, the Sumerians. They did the same thing. Oh, they're wise. They're all powerful. They, we have food because of them. We have, progress because of them. We live in a type of luxury because of them. You forgot about the luxury part, right? Luxury because of them. Any of those places, when you're in good with the kingdom, you have security, you have food, you have shelter, you have all these different things. You're not living as a vagabond. Is it any different than today? No, it isn't. When you're part or in with a corporation or in with any of these governments, you have security. If you're not in with them, not in with a corporation, if you're unemployed, you're a vagabond. You're thrown to the wolves. The same thing. So when people say, I like this place or I like that place, they're actually talking about security. Because if at any time, if you worked for a company that no longer paid you, are you going to like that company? Are you going to like that company? No, you're not. If at any time the company you work for, if they can no longer guarantee a paycheck, you're going to like that company? If they cut your check down to 1/20th of what it used to be, would you like that company? No. Here's a simple fact. People like whatever benefits them. So if it's going to provide you, listen, it's going to provide you peace and security. You're going to say, oh yes, we need more of that. We need more of that. That's what they had back then. The Nephilim fought each other. They fought each other. They devised war. Like I said before, Asbiel, one of the fallen angels, taught how to lie, deceive, and manipulate. Show how to use words as weapons and turn his allies against one another. So that's what he taught. Start confusion among the angels and men. That's what he taught. He knew all of that. Everything he taught was by way of conversation. Gilgamesh, he was in some of those ancient documents, which really brings up an interesting question because you're talking about time intervals. You're talking about when these documents, right, are mentioning all these things, and Gilgamesh is thrown right in the middle of them. Gilgamesh, of all people. I'm nosy, so I wanted to know, well, is Gilgamesh mentioned in any of those documents found with Enoch? They want to keep that confusing. Because if it were mentioned, Gilgamesh was mentioned, then the time that people are thinking about, they would have to reorder time and put it back in perspective again. That changes everything, doesn't it? That changes a lot. Because why? We like to people like to theorize. People like to come up with things and assume the middle of things. I don't like that because often the truth is going to come out later on anyway. I'll wait for the truth. I don't want to assume anything. Here's the frightening part. In Genesis, it said there were Nephilim in the earth before the flood and also after that. You're going to hear me say that lots of times throughout this talk. Why? It's time that people know what they're involved with. what you're involved with. And I mean, for real, we're not talking about just some knowledge here. There are ways to identify, very easy. And you would not like the results. Nevertheless, the results do not lie. And they are 100% effective every single time. Just so you know, not sometimes, every single time. You'd be like somebody, if you did a specific something in your mind, and somebody turned around and looked at you and said, leave me alone. And if that happened every single time, well, I think your world would change, your worldview would change. I also know that a lot of people would not know how to handle that. To have a realization that they're right in the middle of something that they didn't really choose to be in the middle of. To be able to identify the truth of what's all around you, what's been around you since you've been born, is a wake-up call. It's like being hit in the head with a sledgehammer. Saddening to others. Now, as I said before, some of these Nephilim were renowned, mighty men. People regarded some of these Nephilim as honorable, as great, as they looked up to them. That's who people wanted to become. But let me stress this. Just like back then, right now, you have some people who look up to people and they want to be just like them. But those who have a relationship with Christ are predominantly occupied with purging things out of their lives to become more like Christ. Because the Lord is their standard. But those of the world do not have a relationship with the Lord. And so they look up to other things. So just like back then, things are happening today. So let's go back in the past. Forget that they were giants. Some of them were. Many of them were. And that was the problem. They had an insatiable appetite. Now that means they would eat and gorge themselves. And that's been recorded many times. But they were always starving. How can you eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and you're always starving? Now, while I'm saying these things too, I want you guys to take note that every time I mention one of the attributes of the Nephilim, it is one of the very things God said we are not to have. We're not to be gluttons, are we? You can read it in the Bible. Every attribute of the Nephilim, the Lord told us we are not to have it. Leave it alone. You have an insatiable desire and you cannot quench it. What does that mean? That means your hunger is not of the flesh. It's of the soul. They had a hunger for domination. They had a hunger for war. They had a hunger for debate. They had a hunger for deceit. They had a hunger for sorceries. They had a hunger for knowledge. They had a hunger to know everything. They didn't know everything, their dads did. So they had a hunger to know everything, and it was of the soul. And one of the main, when you have a being like that, who has an insatiable appetite of the soul, whether they're in the flesh or out of the flesh, it does not matter. They still have that insatiable appetite. Take note of that. So that means these entities have an insatiable appetite. What does our Father talk about? Lust, the lusts of the flesh. He always talks about lust. A lust is an unquenchable desire. That means you want something, but every time you get it, it's never enough. That's what lust is. That's what the Nephilim had. That was their very nature. That's something they struggled with no matter how much they consumed, no matter how much they learned, no matter how much they killed, no matter how much they fought. They had an insatiable appetite to keep doing the same. And they did so until just about, the blood of the earth was crying out. They consumed the acquisitions of men. They consumed man and beast. They consumed just about everything. People were hiding. People lived a terrible life, hiding in the dark, cavernous regions of the earth where nothing could get to them, and they were praying. They prayed. And Enoch was alive in that time. And they were afraid of Enoch. They were afraid of Enoch. Enoch was a human being, but they were afraid of Enoch. It's something. Enoch is a known character, but no one wants anybody to learn about Enoch. In the Bible, it says Enoch walked with God, right? Enoch walked with God. That's what it says. They were terrified of Enoch. Both the fallen angels and the Nephilim could do nothing against Enoch. Isn't that interesting? The Nephilim couldn't even touch him. They could not touch him. With all the killing and disasters these things were causing against people, they could not touch Enoch. Why? Why? Because Enoch had a relationship with the Most High. That's why. Because they're part angel. Angels have barriers. Angels have certain rules they cannot help by their very nature they have to follow. They cannot touch anybody who's in relationship with the Father. How about that? They cannot do it. They can't. Even if they wanted to, and they did want to, they couldn't do it. And it's not that Enoch was defending himself all the time. No, they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. Isn't that something? What did the Lord Jesus tell you? Yes, he said he gives you power to tread upon scorpions and serpents. And yes, he said he gives you all power over the enemy. But he said nothing will by any means hurt you. Why? Because it cannot. Once you are his, once you are a disciple of his, it can't touch you. Many of you you've been hit upside the head and everything else before you had your serious relationship with Jesus Christ. When you have your serious relationship with the Lord, it changed. Now, if you slip back into sin, you're going to get hit upside the head again. And you already know that because some of you did slip back and they were waiting. And you know it. But when you're in relationship with the Lord, they can't hit you. Why? It can touch nothing of the Messiah's. You didn't have to rebuke anything. They simply cannot touch you if you're in relationship with the Messiah. Because the Messiah, because the Messiah said no. Do you hear me? Listen, not that a billion angels are around you fighting everything off. No, it's because the Messiah said no. It's documented that billions of these Nephilim were running full speed at Raphael, one of the four angels that expelled the Nephilim. And they were angry. A bunch of giants that caused a massive earthquake running directly towards Raphael with their mystical weapons and everything else. And when they got close, Raphael simply raised his hand. He didn't raise it all the way up either. People saw this because they were standing behind those angels. Raphael simply held up his hand, and the angels, the four mighty men, the four angels, they were the size of human beings when they were out there in that open area. Can you imagine a little tiny compared to the Nephilim? Billions of Nephilim come running, and a little tiny angel, the size of a person, not some big tall angel, the size of a person, not even looking at the Nephilim, because he was talking or doing something. They said he raised up his hand halfway, and all the Nephilim stopped. They couldn't even move. They couldn't even move. They didn't stop in obedience. They could not move. They couldn't even speak. They could do nothing. That's one angel. There was no force on the earth that could have stopped the Nephilim. But one of God's angels held up his hand just a little bit, like nonchalantly, just raised it up, and all of them. That's in the writings. Why don't they want people to know that? Why? I mean, it is so clear. If you're honest with yourself and you look at your own life, and if we would not play games with ourselves and look at our own lives, we would know that when we were friends with the world, that's when things happened to us. That's when things got to us. That's when things touched us and messed us up. But those moments when we were serious about Christ, nothing touched us. Nothing. In the moments when you doubted Christ and began to second guess things about Christ and about his word, that's when things touched you. Do you know why? Because when you doubt, you're pushing Christ away. How can Christ be in you when you don't believe him? He's not in you when you don't believe him. But when you believe him, he's in you. His spirit is with you. They can do nothing against the Spirit of Christ. They can do nothing against the Holy Ghost. It does not take a whole wall of angels to fight off everything. One angel held back all the Nephilim on the earth with a hand half raised. No effort. You know what he told them? They were angry. And he told the Nephilim, as he was telling that group of people that were with the angels, right? He told the Nephilim, he said, you know some of what your fathers have taught you, but all of what your fathers know is but a fraction of what the heavens are. And there are greater authority that even they cannot conceive of. My. So that tells me something, because that phrase, that way of using those words lets me know. We may think we know by reading the word what heaven may be, but it lets me know we don't. In fact, it lets me know if an angel cannot hold what heaven is within themselves, how in the world can we do it? That means what we are calling heaven, what we're calling God's domain, is so vast, so far above us. God did not give us the minds to conceive of what it actually is, so he gives us representation and words. I don't think we have the brain power. I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. And yes, I'm one of those people. You know how people have near-death experiences? Each person, because I never talk against anybody who has one of those, but I will tell you this. Heaven is not fractured. So if one person sees it, it's going to be consistent with the other person, consistent with the other person. And it's also going to be consistent with what the Lord said. But the Lord said something in the Bible. He said, when they had that argument about who's going to be in heaven, who's going to be whose wife in heaven, and the Lord said this, don't you know anything? You're going to be like the angels, neither male nor female. See, the male and female thing is needed right here for earth, for reproduction. For earth, not for the eternal realm. We're going to be like the angels, neither male nor female. So I think that in a lot of cases on these near-death experiences, it's called communication. God has to speak to us in those things that we do understand. If he showed us something we couldn't possibly even relate to, a person would just be flabbergasted. And you say, well, what did you see? And they say, well, I don't know. That's what they would say. So he gives them something that they can relate to. I don't think it's about the imagery of what they saw, right? Because if you start looking in these older documents about the Nephilim had dreams, right? People had dreams during the time of the Nephilim. The Nephilim had dreams too. The nature of those dreams were different. For example, one of the sons of Kokabeo, it is written that he spoke about a dream. In that dream, he was in this beautiful field, this beautiful fruit. And that when he walked, he didn't even shake the ground or anything. But then everything in that beautiful garden was gone. And everything burned up and everything went away. And he was left in desolation and he was starting to be carried off. Another one had a dream where he was on the top of a mountain and the mountain was taken away from him. In short, the Lord was showing them that something was coming for them and a time was coming for them. Right? But they had different dreams of the exact same thing. I believe that the Lord does this to communicate directly to us so that we understand in some sort of context what he's saying. If you look over these near-death experiences, all of them have different things. A person may say, well, I saw my dog there. Well, I saw my wife there. Well, I saw my children there, this, that, and the other. In other words, there's peace in that place. There's fulfillment in that place. There's love in that place. I believe the Lord is showing people what they are. Because if he says you're going to be like the angels, neither male nor female, right? Then where are the children? If you're neither male nor female, then something different is going to be there. Plus, even with my pea brain, the Lord had me have an experience. And I'm telling you right now, the only thing that existed in that place was love and pure wisdom and something else I can't give a name to, but it was so fulfilling. Do you understand? If I would have stayed there a little bit more, I would be spoiled back here on earth. And I carried a residue. When I got up from that place, there was a residue with me. You didn't have to wait for a person to talk. You did not. There was even nature there, but nature was different. Everything was instantaneous and everything was truthful. I knew the meaning of things that even right now I desperately have tried over the years to try and this meaning of this one thing, because I told them I wanted to go back and look at the people on the earth and I could see them. I could see the people on the earth and I was in front of this person and I looked at the person and I said, this is not what any of this is about. That's what I was saying in my heart. But here's the deal. I saw this person 12 years later. 12 years later, I saw this person. I'd never seen that person before in my life, but 12 years later, I saw that person with that, they went through something. And that person went through something. I've seen people in truck. I've seen lots of people the Lord showed me in a dream starting when I was a kid that I had 24 times. And I have met the exact people that were in that dream. Now, this is not to pat me on the back or anything. This is just to say there's a whole bunch we don't know. But I'm telling you fulfillment. It's in the eternal realm. Fulfillment is when, you know how a lot of people say, well, when I get to heaven, I hope I'm going to be happy there because I don't like this and I don't like that. Nope. You're right here in a human mindset. You're in a very limited mindset. In fact, your flesh is a restriction on your spirit. It's blocking everything. You can only conceive of so much. You can only understand of so much. But once it's gone, once that transition takes place, you're going to be in a place that you'll have fulfillment. And when I say fulfillment, I mean everything in you that you're everything. You're going to have absolute fulfillment. And if you've never felt that before, if you never had that before, in fact, if the Lord gave you a sneak peek of what fulfillment was, you wouldn't complain about your work with the Lord another day. You'd be willing to lay down your life for anybody because in that moment you'd realize something. There is nothing in man's mind, nor is there anything he can conceive of, nor is there anything he could invent or dream of that would even come close to what the Lord has for us. Even for the worst of us, we don't have the minds. We don't have anything to capture even a true piece of what the Lord has in store for us. We don't. We just don't. Because I felt a piece of fulfillment. And all the pain in the world that everybody goes through here, I'm telling you now, it's worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it. There's nobody that's going to get to that place and say that life here was not worth it. You're going to feel like you cheated somebody. That's what you're going to feel like wow, I should have spent another 900 billion years there to go through torment. Then maybe that would have been fair enough. But see, our problem is we think everything has to be within the realm of our thinking. We do so in great error. Back to the giants. Back to these Nephilim. They're no problem to the angels. And when they die, there was a written piece that's very interesting. When they die, when the Nephilim died, when they died in the great flood, their spirits would be known as demons. But hear me on this. The character of the Nephilim, you can know through these documents that were found. That's what's so interesting. There was a Nephilim that always negotiated, a group of them. They always would negotiate. They were nice, they were inviting, but they always negotiated. They were always plotting and planning. All of them collectively, with their leader, Semyaza, wanted to create a new world order. That's what was written a long time ago. They said he had it in his mind, Semyaza had it in his mind, that he could re-subdue the earth and do a better job than the Most High. That he could educate mankind and grant mankind a greatness on this earth. And that he would have children, and those fallen angels should have children on this earth to run it. They wanted their children to inherit kingship of the earth. Now that's why you have the Mayan story. And you have the prophecy in the Mayans about right before they were wiped out. They said, well, yep, we're going to rule for 2,000 years. Wrong. They were taken out. In fact, in all these dead civilizations, they all said the same thing with the same promise. They did. They said the same thing. But how can all of these civilizations in different parts of the world have the same prophecy that they were going to rule for 2,000 years? Huh? Because you're dealing with the same entities. That's why. When you have these echoed sayings, It means that some sort of influence was speaking the same thing to everybody else. That's what it means. So that means that promise came from the same source. That's what it means. That's what it means. Now, as I said before, some of these Nephilim, they were negotiators. People looked up to them. People depended on them. Some of them were absolutely evil and tyrants. They were all different. And when they died, they would be known as demons in the earth. Now, that word demon, you can't find that in the Bible. You can. You know that, right? You cannot find that word demon. You know what Jesus called him? Unclean spirit. Do you hear me? Unclean. What does that word unclean mean? The word unclean means unsanctioned, not authorized. It's not cleaned. See, anything cleaned with the Father is acceptable. It's acceptable, right? If it's unclean, it's not acceptable. If it's cleaned, it's acceptable. If it's unclean, it is not acceptable. These spirits are unclean spirits. They're not acceptable. They're not acceptable. Here's the worst part. It was already prophesied that these things would reside within people in the end time. Lots of people who would take on their characteristics. They would be taught. Men would be taught of these spirits, these unclean spirits. And they would resurrect kingdoms in the earth that mirrored those of the Nephilim. I thought about that. I said, okay, the Nephilim had a lust problem, a hunger problem. So do the people today. They can never have enough power. They can never have enough war. It can be a peaceful time. Somebody's going to think up something to go to war, do something to go to war. They spend most of the money on weapons, don't they? They spend all their time with intellectual things, not to save humanity, but to venture beyond Mars or something like that. Just think about that. We spend most of our intellectual time thinking about things that will never benefit humanity. We spend most of our time because we're curious on things out there. And with everything we learn, it's never enough. With everything we get, it is never enough. With everything we achieve, it is never enough. With everything God has given us, it is never enough. So what influence do you see over mankind right now? Right now. What influence? The same thing that existed thousands of years ago. The same characteristics, the same mindset, the same everything. It's one thing the Nephilim did not do. They never thanked their parent angels. They never did that. They never thanked them. Because in truth, they always wanted the admiration for everything they did, and they would fight over the admiration. They wanted people to look at them as though they were the answer to everything. That's what they wanted. So in front of the people, they did many things taught by Asbiel. Amia, Azazel, so on and so forth. They can't do anything. They're bound up. You're not going to release them by saying their names. They're done for. But their children, here it is. Those angels are bound up, but they taught their children everything they knew. And their children are on the earth right now. They're known as unclean spirits. They're all over the earth. Can you see the world you're in right now? Can you spiritually discern the tug that day-to-day tug of war that you're going through. Why does your spiritual walk, and it seems like a harmless walk in the world, why do they contradict so much? Why is it always that you have to let one down to take up the other? Why? That should tell you something right there. And why is there always some sort of power that will come and cover up things? When you have an insight spiritually like that, something comes quickly to cover it all up. Why is your flesh drawn to the rituals of this world? You ever get in a habit of doing the same thing every day? That's ritualistic. As for your flesh, your spirit doesn't need that. Your flesh does. What is that? It's a form of control. See, nobody wants to feel like they're out of control. So what do you do every day? You exercise that control. Hear me on this. Come on, you got to see this of your flesh. You will exercise that control so you have a sense of control. If you do not exercise that control, you feel like you're losing your mind. You feel like you're losing your mind. So what is that? That's another point of contradiction, isn't it? Can't you see it? In fact, one of the best pieces of advice for a person is to clean up their environment. Make your environment neat, to clarify your thoughts. But that still, it forms habits. And with those habits, you will control it. See, we all do it because if somebody came in my domain and started moving stuff around, I'd be like, oh, what are you doing? Right? Because you're going to notice. Why? Because it's our environment and we like things the way we like it. But I'm trying to show you something in your flesh, not your spirit, but your flesh. Your flesh needs placement, and it will always hunger for a type of control, period. Doesn't matter who you are, it's going to hunger for a type of control, always. It wants what it wants. You know, in the Bible, when it says the flesh and the spirit do war against one another, that means they're not on the same page. That's what it means. They're not on the same page. They are, in fact, against each other. Now, what has power to influence your flesh? Anybody know? What have you been contending with? How does a demon truly get in somebody's life? An unclean spirit. The Nephilim. How do they get in your life? Because they want, listen, they desire badly to be in flesh again. It was already written that that would be one of their major desires, would be to exercise themselves in flesh again, to be in you, to be in a body where they can feel again, where they can hurt again, where they can do things again. So it is said of these Nephilim, they had extraordinary strength, extraordinary intellect. They were extraordinarily harsh. Many of them were, right? So when you see of a person getting possessed, everything mentioned in these 4,000 to 7,000-year-old papers manifests in that person. The same exact things. And they lie about their names. Why would I'm going to tell you something. I personally I don't need to know. I don't go by men's doctrines. And just in case you don't know, yes, I've directly fought some things in my life, right? I did not do it by name, not by their name. I don't need to know their name. I just need to know that the Messiah is my Savior. I don't need to know their name. I don't trust what they say because they lie. That's part of their tactics. They're going to lie. That's why you have certain ones that say, well, who are you? Well, I'm Lucifer. No, you're not. You're not Lucifer. I'm not going to toy with those things. I know this for a fact. Either the Bible is right or it's not right. And if you have Christ within you, they want nothing to do with you. And if you come up to them with Christ in you, you have all authority over them. But you cannot invite them nor challenge them by way of your flesh. If you do, you just invited them in. You can invite the Nephilim through your disobedience. You can invite the Nephilim through your emotions. You can invite the Nephilim if you have any of the activities in your life that they had in theirs. That's an invitation. So if you like debate, you're going to invite them into your life. And once you do that, you have a strong influence attached to you. And it's not going to leave you either. It's going to stay with you until you are immersed in Christ. It's going to be there. You notice in this day and age, a lot of psychics are around, right? All these psychics. Have you guys noticed that? Oh, there are a bunch of psychics. A bunch of them. Yet none of them can name anything that's happened in the world before it ever happened. None of them have helped out anybody, have they? Even that is a form of them. They're very cunning. They are. Remember when Paul cast the demon out of that woman? He said, hey, do you realize what you're doing? Now I'm over here preaching the truth, and you're over there doing your thing, trying to dovetail off what do you know what you're doing? And he cast that demon out, and the guy said, now what am I going to do for employment? She's powerless. She has no abilities because you just cast it out of her. Now what am I going to do? You made me go broke. You guys ever read that in the Bible? That's in the New Testament, by the way, just in case you haven't read that. Just in case you haven't read that. When you do that, they become part of you. Now, the Lord gave us a list of things to check ourselves with. A clear distinction between the affected flesh and the health of your spirit. But for the sake of this conversation, take a look into the world. Take a look at the world as it is right now. And tell me that nothing's wrong with it. That those things of old have nothing to do with the world today. Could you tell me that with a certainty? Do you see what's happening? Imagine when it surfaces. There will be a disclosure, not of ET. It'll be a disclosure of truth, of who's been influencing who. And when that truth comes forward, it's going to cause a sickness within people they never thought possible. That means in our lives, we have some serious choices to make. We can either lift up the name of the Lord and begin to see the truth of this world and do the work we've been sent here to do. We can continue to attempt to bridge the gap and to lift up the Lord and the world at the same time. I can assure you that's not going to work. Because once you get involved with the one, the other one drops. Look carefully at the world. Now, you're not to be stuck. None of us are to be stuck in ignorance. So let me do a recap on something. He clearly said that this kingdom, this last kingdom that we're in, I believe the word they used was flushed, something like that. In other words, people would be full of these Nephilim spirits. They're not giants, but they have the same unquenchable desires, the same behaviors, the same knowledge. Listen to me. That means people are walking around utilizing the knowledge of the Nephilim in modern times right now. And if you go back yourselves and read exactly what these things had knowledge in, and you start looking at the world now, that's what gives you a shocker. Because what they couldn't finish then, they're finishing now. That culminates into the beast kingdom. Just as the word has told us. Right now, is anybody out there? I'm going to ask you something. Don't get offended, but is anybody out there subdued by the world system right now? Is anybody out there subdued by the world system? I know a lot of people, they don't want to answer that question because deep down inside, you already know. A lot of people won't ask that question. Do you know why? Because everybody is receiving from the system, and everybody is living by the system, and everybody is operating within the influences of the system. With Christ, you begin to see that, and that becomes sort of a controversy in your life. Haven't you noticed that in order to be comfortable in this world, you have to compromise your faith to do so? Haven't you noticed that? There is something in your life, in my life, in everybody else's life, that in order to live comfortably in this world, you're going to have to compromise something. I know people, they say, well, I'm getting a promotion. Is that right? Well, who's getting fired? So-and-so. They don't even care. They don't care. It's not that the company is making more money. Somebody has to lose for another to gain. There are people starving 50 miles away, no more than 50 miles away from all of us. Somebody not more than 50 miles away is starving right now. Think about that. Lots of folks going through these same things. The same things. This is given this in this world. For one to gain, others have to lose. Look at where you're at. Because with the Lord, you're either, listen, if you're with the Lord and the Lord's within you, you speak differently, you do things differently, everything is different. Never try to compensate for that for anybody. Just realize where you are. You're supposed to be here, but realize where you are. I'll be back in a few minutes, everybody. You know what? Nobody told me what time it was, y'all. Everybody is late. Is it not? Let me turn that back down. Happy birthday to somebody in there whose current age is, I can't say it. I'll get hurt. Do you all know there are some details? We just touched the surface of something. There are certain activities in the lives of the Nephilim that are an influence upon you right now. And just in case you don't know, right? As I said before, there is a method of testing this that will give you feedback 100% of the time. That means if you were out in the public without saying a word, and you employed that method that nobody could hear, somebody would turn to you and say, "Leave me alone." Somebody would turn and look you dead in the eye and get away from you. Or somebody would turn and look you in the eye and approach you swiftly. Hopefully, you'd have the right anchor. What I'm telling you is that you're in the middle of a world. It's not make-believe, but confirmable. And that's the first part. The basis, I believe people should know of what they're dealing with, what this influence is upon them. Now, these things have no power over your lives unless you invite them into your lives. And to invite them into your lives is to become exactly what they were. And the only way that's going to happen is if you do not have Christ. That's why they fired yet another exorcist. That's why the Catholic Church stopped another exorcist. Because they're saying the same things. This disclosure topic is dealing with demons. Do you not know that everybody who has said that or has that idea has been either killed or taken out of the loop or hospitalized? There's a person who should be floating around. It'll start floating around on the internet. This guy is a physicist. But he too came to the conclusion that these other unknown things are likely have or something to deal with demons. Except this guy recorded a traffic stop. Listen, on the traffic stop, a medical person came up to him and demanded that he come to the hospital to be evaluated. You can't do that on a traffic stop. If you guys saw this, you'd say, "No way," but it happened. And this person is held to this day, but he's not the only one. There are dozens upon dozens of people being taken and held in hospitals, or nobody sees them again, who have had physicians on the inside who have come to this conclusion. So if you've heard anybody say it, don't forget they said it. Because all of them are being swept away. One of the main, I know people get fascinated with the movies and this, that, and the other. I think it's time people begin to understand what they've been dealing with this entire time. And what the emphasis, the importance of Christ is right now in this kingdom. This kingdom has already been prophesied. The Lord already knew they were coming. Now, somebody asked me one time, can the tares and the Nephilim, can they find salvation? You don't understand if you're asking that. You don't understand. They're in their soul, right? It's one thing for the flesh to have a big appetite that can never be quenched. It's another thing for your soul to never be able to be satiated. No satisfaction of the soul means you have a lust problem in the soul, and that is unnatural. If you have a lust problem of the soul, nothing will satisfy you. And if you cannot be satisfied of the soul, that is the very nature of darkness itself. You do know that, right? If your soul cannot be satisfied, a Redeemer is never going to be enough. God will never be enough. And that is the entire issue with darkness itself. Don't you know that? Satan has the same problem. His soul, The soul of Satan can never be satisfied, so he's always going to want more. And the soul can never be satisfied. You will always seek to have more than what you're given. And what you're given will never be enough. That is darkness. That is darkness. That's what leads people to do the worst things in life they have ever done. That's why the entire Bible is set up to have us understand what lust is. It's the same thing. Lust is an unquenchable desire. God is against lust and anything connected with lust that way. Lust is not only the sexual lust, any type of lust, whether it be gluttony, whether it be identity, whatever it is. If you are in a position where you cannot be satisfied of your soul, you will destroy yourselves and everything else around you. That is darkness. That is what Satan is. That's what the fallen had within them. That's what the Nephilim are right now. And this world is designed by the very one that popped out from both human beings and the fallen a long time ago. Their fingerprints are in everything. Can anybody explain that? Why is it that this modern day world and everything in it matches the characteristics of the Nephilim? Why? Why is their nature found in everything that exists in the modern world? From television shows to advertisements to construction, their fingerprints are everywhere. No wonder in the New Testament it states, to love the world is to have enmity with God. That is an angry separation from God. If you love this world and the things therein, you're separated from the living God. Because anybody with the love of God in them cannot love this world. Why? Because to love this world is to love the systems in the world, is to love all this junk that's been in the world and how it operates and this, that, and the other. Indeed, you have people born who are experts in the world. Isn't it ironic that most people who come to Christ, they're not experts in the world? They don't understand many of the concepts that are easily understood by those who are of the world. I know a guy, he was born knowing politics. When he became an adult, he fought Christ every step of the way to this very day. He stands against Christ. Why is it that when a person understands the things of the world the way they do not follow Christ? Why? Wouldn't a smart, intellectual person have a relationship with Christ? Why is it not like that? Why are the smartest people haunted by obvious evils? Haven't you noticed that? I'll tell you something. If you're a friend of this world, then that means the world likes you. And if the world likes you, then you're not standing with the living God nor Christ. Because if you stand with the Lord, the world's going to hate you. Think about that. Put all this together. Please put all this together, because so many Christians are they're begging God to have the world love them. The same world he said, don't be a friend of the world, because the world is against Christ. The world is against the living God. And what do people pray? Lord, let the world be my friend. If the Lord is within you, the world's going to be against you. They won't agree with your views. They're going to call you an idiot and everything else. Why? Because of their characteristics. They're going to believe that they're right about everything they say. They're going to believe in what they have created themselves. There are properties or characteristics of darkness that are within people that everybody needs to know, and hardly people don't really know them. For example, in the Bible it says, a true sinner and the people who will be doomed at the end of time, these people worship the works of their own hands. Let me say that slower. They worship the works of their own hands. So whatever they built, they lift up. Whatever they built, whatever they designed, they lift up. They make whatever they built be the glorious thing of that moment, of that time, of that generation, of that millennia. Whatever they built, they lift up. They don't lift up what the Lord put together. They lift up what they put together. They compensate what they put together. They make excuses for it, everything else, and then they lift it up above the word of the Lord every single time. That's a trait that's in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and something they cannot help but to do. They worship the works of their own hands. Well, somebody name something that mankind made and that mankind lifts up all the time. You're not going to like it. The Lord mentioned it, and the Pharisees hated him for it. The Lord said, you made something unto yourselves, and you shouldn't have. You ready? Rules. R-U-L-E-S. Rules. They made up their own rules, and they lift their own rules up above everybody else's. Think about that for a moment. Just think about that for a moment. Just for one moment. And you'll start to see it. You'll also start to see how that many without knowing are already in worship of something extremely dark, and it takes Christ to rectify that. Now, with Christ, that's the only way justification can be brought in. So what am I telling you? I'm telling you this. Without morals, it's an abomination, and that's going to be the end of it. See, if it weren't that way, how then could the beast system ever come in? How could the system of the beast ever be propped up if somehow man were to rectify some things by morals, like politics, like the Constitution? The Constitution is a beautiful work, it truly is, but it's not going to work without morals. If you get a bunch of twisted people, right? How's the Constitution going to work with a bunch of twisted people? And yes, it is something that man created. Just don't jump on the side of those who try to invalidate those things in the Constitution, right? Don't jump on the side of those who also turn it into an argument. Don't jump on that side either. It's a well thought out document. The problem is you have to be moral for it to work, because freedom of speech. Well, what if you get a bunch of people out there that curse? They're protected under freedom of speech. Blasphemers protected under freedom of speech. You see how this goes? You see how it goes? So let me clarify this. When he creates something, you can only break it. When man creates something, if you lose your moral, the devil can use it. The devil cannot use God's word. He can break it. He just can't use it. Like, they can't do that. But man is different. Man is not the creator. And anything we make, right? Man came up with a constitution. Anything we make can be used against us. I think it's important for all of you to know that within yourselves. You got to know that within yourselves. Because believe me when I tell you something like the Constitution can be utilized to cause you to become an abomination. Imagine if somebody made you kill somebody else because they weren't following the Constitution. Who's the bad person in God's eyes in that case? You are. So there are people purposely trying to drive people bonkers by doing things in a very specific way to taint what you meant for good. They're tainting it. Don't let people do that. Do you hear me? In your homes, don't let anybody taint what you have meant for good. Don't let them taint it. Turn it into some sort of curse. How do you stop them? Stop falling for what they're saying. Don't get drawn into what they're saying. Stop believing what they're saying. You know why people get loud and angry and everything else at somebody else's comments? Because they believe every word they say. Since when do we believe every word that man says? I believe the word of the Lord because it's from the Lord. But I do not believe every word that man says. The only way you're going to get upset is if you believe everything that man says. Please think about that. That'll keep you out of the upcoming riots as the fires sweep through and the rogue nation breaks away. But that's a midnight hour discussion. Realize the world you're living in. Identify it. Stand with those things of the Messiah and of the Word of God. Stand with them. Because these are the days of inventory. People are being accounted for. And stop being afraid. Don't live your life being afraid of dark forces. Don't do that. If one angel halted all the Nephilim, you have more than one around you. Angel, that is. But still in good standing with the Father. How can one angel be so powerful? Haven't you got it yet? The word is messenger, correct? What does a messenger do? It carries a message from somebody else. The messenger is not the originator of the message. The messenger simply carries the message. When God gives a message to an angel, if he were to tell Michael, subdue the sun, does Michael always have the power to subdue the sun? No. As God commands, the command is the power. If God were to tell someone to do something, the command is the power. If God were to tell one of you, hey, I want you to go lay your hands on so-and-so and go back home, it's not that you have the power. But when you obey the Lord, you're going forward with his message, and in his message is the power. You see that? So as you go to do what the Lord has sent you to do, you've released his word by way of obedience on somebody else. God watches over his word to perform it. So if it's his word, he'll perform it. You're just bringing it to them, and nothing can stop you. Why? Because he told you to go. If he tells you to go somewhere to do something, then he's empowered you to plow through everything to get there. You have everything you need to accomplish what the Lord sends you to do. Just make sure he sends you to do it, so you'll be empowered. Now, if you go on your own, you're on your own. Do you understand? If you go on your own, you're really on your own. You may not be able to muster enough to get through something, but if God sends you, you carry something of His, and it's by His authority. You'll get through, and nothing can halt His authority. Nothing. See, a lot of people, they hit walls. They didn't wait on the Lord. They went on their own. And they can't muster enough. But if God sends you, nothing can stop you. See, that's what one of the leading Pharisees told the other Pharisees. He said, hey, be careful what you do to these men. Because see, what God starts, nobody can stop. And if you fight against them, you're going to find yourself fighting against the Creator. That's what He warned them about. He said, you better be careful what you do to these men. If this is from God, nobody has power to stop it. But He told them if it's not from God, it's going to come to an end. He told them, be careful. All of us should remember that. We can walk in these ways, but we have to finally simply acknowledge they are what they are. And yes, we have sent ourselves. And yes, we have initiated conversations we shouldn't have at the wrong time with people in His name because we wanted them to change at that time. Time for us to walk forward with His authority, unstoppable. Don't you think? Well, I like this scripture because we were just talking about angels, right? To as many as believe upon His name has He given power to become sons of God. That's what an angel is, a direct creation of the living God. A direct creation of the living God. Because you're authorized to take an assignment. You're authorized to go in the name of the Lord and never be stopped. Just remember, if you do it under your own steam, if you determine the timing, it's going to fall on your shoulders. You may not be able to do it all, but if the Lord sends you, nothing can stop you. If the Lord sends you, nothing can stop you. God bless each of you. I'm not going to hold you hostage. I'm going to see you guys later on. If the player turns on 11:59, you guys already know what that is, right? You know what that is. Midnight hour. God bless and keep all of you always. I'm going to see you next time right here at the Council of Time. God bless.